Hello and welcome to another movie review here on HSG Unlimited, and for a full exposure, I was not originally planning on reviewing this movie at all. It's a movie that wasn't on my radar, I hadn't even heard of it to be honest, and Netflix is a pretty good place for these smaller, less obvious choices of thriller and horror. I've watched some really good ones on there, reviewed some of them as well, but this one was actually brought to my attention by my girlfriend. She's on TikTok, I'm not, and on TikTok this movie is something of a challenge, something of a trend. People saying they couldn't finish it in one sitting, they couldn't finish it at all, maybe they finished the movie and they were crying or they were scared. People in certain parts of the world in particular, which this movie might hit home a bit harder for, were, I would say, understandably scared. To me, there is one thing about this movie which does deliver on the aspect of it being virally scary, if you want to talk about it that way. However, the rest of the movie, I think, is fine. I don't think it's amazing. I don't think it's outstanding. I don't think it's overly memorable even. It's very similar to The Ring. It is a Taiwanese movie, came out this year, March of 22. I'm not even going to try and pronounce the names of the people involved because I'm going to butcher those. But the story is extremely familiar. One or more people disrespect a religious occasion, go somewhere they shouldn't go, end up being terrorized by someone or something, some entity, some monster, some creature, whatever the particular movie decides to use, in this case supernatural, to wreak havoc in their lives and cause all kinds of tension, dread, horror, and probably death. It's a very familiar setting. Doesn't mean it's bad, but the problem is you've really got two choices when you're making a movie. You can either do something that no one else has done, or you can do something that has been done before, but either do it better or put a new spin on it. The problem is this movie doesn't really do either of those. It doesn't really present anything radically new, but what it does do is very familiar to existing things. Now, the one really good idea in the movie is a spoiler. So to really get into the best aspect of the movie, that's going to have to come in a second. For basically summing up my non-spoiler thoughts, though, I will say that the movie is most definitely being overhyped. And without judging people harshly, to me this is just a fact, and I'm not saying it as a bad thing, the pool of people who I believe are being really affected by this movie, really scared, etc., are probably people who haven't seen that many intense horror movies. I would wager a significant amount of money that the vast majority of people who are TikToking about this movie, who actually, mean their TikToks and aren't just trying to cash in on the views, have probably never seen movies like Martyrs, Irreversible, Calvaire, maybe even not something like Train to Busan. These movies which are semi-well-known to more obscure, and they certainly haven't seen movies like even Come and See, stuff like that, which isn't necessarily even traditional horror. These movies kind of raise your standard of what intense, disturbing, scary would be. And to me, this smacks more of the kind of movie where people might have seen like a Friday the 13th, maybe a Halloween, and they consider those to be like pretty scary and fun. If that's the kind of pool that you're working with, then sure, this movie would be pretty scary. I would say, though, that this movie, within the more found footage camera style, which is what this is, it's actually more of like a vlog style. It's actually remarkably similar, I believe, to Wreck. Except Wreck is scarier, I would say. Wreck, I think, is a very good movie. Similar in some ways. More self-contained than this one is, but both very effective. And I would say that if you did enjoy this one, definitely check out Wreck if you haven't already, and potentially vice versa. So if it wasn't already apparent, I don't think this is a bad movie by any stretch. I actually think it's quite good. It's well made, it's competently made, the acting is good, the characters are, for the most part, likeable. People flap sometimes here and there, but for the most part, they don't really make too many stupid decisions. Besides the inciting one, of course, which tends to happen in a non-linear fashion. The timeline is a bit all over the place in the movie. But ultimately, I think that's really it for my non-spoiler thoughts. Now then, if you haven't seen the movie, you've had your fair warning, because I'm going to dive straight in with the biggest spoiler in the movie, and which I believe is the cleverest thing in the movie. This is the one thing which in one particular TikTok that I saw, a kid, I believe, who lived in that part of the world or somewhere in that region, he mentioned, of course I can speak freely now because I'm going to assume that you've seen the movie, that he said the incantation in the movie, which you are multiple times encouraged to repeat by the character along with the symbol on the screen. He repeated it out loud. He even said it to his, I believe, Buddha statue. And then afterwards, of course, when the big reveal comes that it's not a protective incantation, but you're actually asking the spirits to bring the curse upon you in your name, that he was understandably terrified. Now, that one I could fully believe, because I was raised in a very religious upbringing, and up until the age of 18, I would have fully believed that things that I did could have invoked the anger of stuff like demons. So I totally understand believing 100% that you could do something in a movie that could affect you in real life. So on that level, that could be very effective, and that is by far the best thing that this movie has going for it. Now me, of course, even with that religious upbringing, perhaps even partially because of that residual upbringing, I didn't even say the incantation out loud. And I think this is probably maybe a white guy thing, maybe just a white person thing in general. Chances are most people who watch the movie, at least in England, America, countries like that, we're probably not going to say the incantation out loud anyway. But of course I didn't, because in the movie she's saying, repeat this with me. And of course with my personality type, I'm like, no. So of course I didn't say anything out loud anyway, but I could fully see that if you were invested enough in it, especially with that religious background, sure, it could be terrifying. Problem is, that's a very, very niched part of the movie, a very niched part of your audience, and for the rest of people, I don't think it hits quite that well. And for people who are non-religious, it probably won't even hit you at all in that way, even if you did say the incantation. So to me, that is by far the best thing that the movie has going for it. But ultimately, of course, being so similar to a movie like The Ring, the core of this movie is almost exactly the same, this idea of spreading it to more people. Like I said, I think it is a good movie. I just don't think it deserves this extreme level of almost Cinnamon Challenge or Harlem Shake level hype, which it seems to be building. Now, maybe it won't ever reach that level, and honestly, I hope it doesn't, because the movie doesn't deserve that kind of critique. But I did want to put my 10 cents, my 2 cents, whatever, into talking about this flick, because I do think it's a decent movie. I do think it's worth a watch if you are just savoring and, really wanting more horror to check out, especially if you, like myself, enjoy non-English horror. Many of my favorite movies are French, Spanish, Italian, Korean. But if you have seen movies like the ones I've talked about on the channel, stuff like Martyrs, that level, then this one won't scare you at all. I think that the atmosphere is very good. When things such as, toward the end, I don't recall the character's name, but the female, not a soothsayer, but the husband and wife, I believe, who are trying to help her by getting rid of the spirits, trying to cleanse the camera, when she's facing Blair Witch style, again, away from her, clawing at the back of her head, then it was so obvious what was going to happen with her face being the wrong way around. To me, the tension of those, or when the daughter's up in the air, Hereditary style, those moments, or when the little girl, for example, jumps off the ledge, I think that's one of the best moments of the film, because I thought, okay, are we going to do a Psycho here? Are we going to kill off basically the main character that you care about and just move on in another way? I think they kind of should have, because maybe that would have been an interesting twist, and then figure out, have the mother, instead of trying to protect her, have her already be broken, and somehow you've still got to root for her. That could have been interesting. But overall, the movie, the plot, even the way it pans out, it's very familiar. And although the details, some, here or there, are interesting, to me, the ghost faces are a bit cliche at this point. Some of the special effects were a little cliche, but, perfectly fine for the movie. It's certainly not killers for it being a decent flick or worthy of being checked out. But I wanted to make the movie to measure and kind of push back on this level of hype that it's been getting. It's worth checking out, but really, really measure your expectations. If you're at this point in the movie, you already know this, or it's been spoiled for you. But that's it for my 2 cents on Incantation. And of course, if you want to check out other horror flicks that I've talked about on the channel, of course you can find those here on HSGU. But until next time, I'll see you then. And for now, as always, thanks for watching.